In chapter 8, we are going to talk about metabolism in its general sense. We talk about metabolism specifically in chapter 9 when we talk about cellular respiration. So again, what we're doing is introducing you to the mechanics of metabolism, so the pieces of it and what they mean, so that when you then go and try to understand the concepts of what's going on in cellular respiration, the concepts will make a little bit more sense to you. And so we had some nice pictures here of some great animals eating, and that is part of metabolism. Actually, it's a huge part of metabolism. However, metabolism is defined as the study of the total chemical reactions that happen in an organism. So that total chemical reaction idea means that you have actually energy coming in from outside in some way, whether that be solar energy in the case of plants, and then in terms of this moose is going to eat the plant and get the energy that was stored in the plant. That stored form of energy that the moose ate then is going to turn into an energy form the moose can use to then turn into mechanical energy. So all of this is the total of what an organism is capable of in terms of chemical reactions. And please understand that many times, particularly with heterotrophs, that needs to come from outside. We're little chemical factories, and thousands of reactions occur. We sometimes think of metabolism as the breaking down of food, and that's a really good way to start with regard to understanding what metabolism is, but it isn't the sum total of everything that your body does. Certainly extracts energy and uses that energy for various things that need to be run in the body, and many of the things that are being run in the body and in life, I tend to use the body as my scenario of explanation because we all have one, so it's easy to relate to them. However, this interesting fungi can convert energy to light, and it's interesting. There are some areas that have become somewhat touristy, where there are bacteria that when they are disturbed or when they are in more of a flight or fight form, they create this bioluminescence, and people travel to see this. They travel to areas where this bacteria is just to see this bioluminescence. So these chemical factories can be things that are very relatable to us, like our breaking down of food, or things that are actually part of what makes nature such a wonderful mystery in the fact that some things can convert energy to light. Here's your definition of metabolism, and remember, as I said, that I've said in numerous times in class, a lot of what you're doing in this Bio 101, which is more of an introductory or survey level course, is understanding what is the definition of terms. So your definition of metabolism is total chemical reactions. It's an emergent property that has come about by the interactions of molecules within the cell. So the thing about this, it probably sounds very very obvious, but as we'll learn about in this particular chapter, further on, there are enzymes that facilitate these reactions. There are coupling of energy use, where in one reaction energy is made, and that energy then is made is used to run another reaction. And then you have chemicals that regulate all of these processes, so feedback mechanisms. So this totality of chemical reactions, and adding this other level in terms of metabolism, arises from the interaction of molecules within the cell. And so we tend to call them pathways, metabolic pathways, because they aren't usually going from point A to point B. Usually getting from point A to point B can be somewhat of a process. It can be sometimes can be a cyclical process, like the Krebs cycle or TCA cycle, which we study about in next chapter, or it can be a process where it's step-by-step process. Each step can be and usually is catalyzed by a specific enzyme. Remember, enzyme is a macromolecule, meaning you have more than one element in it that is can act as a catalyst. Catalyst can lower the activation rate, can speed up the reaction in terms of what an enzyme does. And the image you have here, you have a substrate. That's the green triangle. That then is fitting into the first enzyme and then creating an intermediate substrate 2, which is the purple. So what you're having is you actually have one substrate because of the enzyme is turning into a completely different form, because actually the enzyme is bringing two pieces of it together. You end up with an end product that then will stop or slow the whole cycle. That makes sense. Once the product is made, that may be all that the cell needs of that particular product that is being made. You want to be able to stop the process. You don't want to just make one product continually, because the cell needs many other products. We'll talk about that a little bit later in this chapter. Just refresher and maybe add a little bit more. Catabolic pathways. Catabolic is a word that we have definitely been familiar with, is the degrading of complex molecules, otherwise known as breaking them down into simpler compounds. Anabolic pathways consume energy to build molecules from simpler ones, and these two reactions tend to work side by side. You're building up in anabolic, where energy is required in this particular reaction, and that energy that's required in an anabolic reaction can come from a catabolic one, and vice versa. Generally, we go from breaking down to building up, and in terms of we take things in like food, break it down so that we can build up molecules that can become more of us. Bioenergetics, another term to put in your list of your grab bag of terms now. Bioenergetics is the study of how organisms manage their energy resources. So how of the energy that you make, where does the body choose to send it? Now, it's definitely going to send it to your basic functioning organisms. So it's definitely going to be sent to the heart, it's definitely going to be sent to the lungs, definitely going to be sent to the brain, and then if there's left over, and hopefully there is, it'll be sent to other functioning parts of the body, like your lymphatic system, like your endocrine system, and maybe to keep you warm. But you've probably met people who are in a state of disease, and for example, somebody who has cancer, one of the things we worry about is their immune system. They're immunocompromised, and part of that is because there isn't either it's not working that they're able to make antibodies, or they just don't have the actual energy to make antibodies in terms of their body. Energy is defined as the capacity to cause change. It's a nice general catch-all definition of the word energy. And when you think about it, it's kind of a nice definition of the word energy, because it's more of a philosophical definition as opposed to just a chemical definition. But think about it, even in say politics or sociology or music, which I know many of you are interested in things other than science, having the capacity to cause change, is a very positive source, usually a source for good, hopefully, but there you have that definition of the word energy. Forms of energy, you have kinetic, and that's the energy associated with movement. You have thermal energy. You have when random atoms tend to move around, that movement is inefficient, and that kinetic energy that's associated with random movement, so the moving of atoms, gives off a heat, and we call this thermal energy. We have potential energy, and that certainly is true of all of us. We all have potential energy. That's what a matter possesses because of its location or structure. And again, understanding what these terms mean, chemical energy, the amount of energy that can be released if a reaction goes forward, a chemical reaction. Remember, you have your substrates, and then you have your reaction, and then you have your reactants. So if that goes forward, that can actually release energy, particularly if you break bonds. And there is this concept that energy can be converted from one form to another. So going through those, what we have, the person who's standing on the diving board or diving platform, I guess it is, has a tremendous amount of potential energy because of his location, or her location, is at a high place and can then dive off. The person who's climbing up the steps is converting kinetic energy, the climbing, into potential energy. So that's conversion of energy from one form to another. And the diving person, the person who has taken the dive off the platform, is converting potential energy into kinetic. Then when the diver is in the water, less potential energy in the water than on the platform. So that energy has been released in kinetic energy to go from the platform to the water, and in that course of releasing energy, heat is lost. And this is always true. When energy goes from one form to another, heat is going to be lost. Laws of energy transformation, this is called thermodynamics. And there are two laws. You've probably heard this before, the terms, the first and second law of thermodynamics. But thermodynamics itself is the study of energy transformation. And with the study of energy transformation, because that energy is transformed to somewhere, we have isolated systems or closed systems, depending on how what particular source you use to read, is like liquid in a thermos. Generally, if you take your coffee to work and it's in a thermos, that will keep your coffee warm much longer. And that's because the heat of the coffee is not dissipating into the outside environment. Whereas if you take your coffee to work in your coffee cup, very quickly that coffee is going to become the same temperature as the ambient environment. And that's an open energy system where the energy is constantly being transferred into the surroundings. We as organisms live in open systems. Our energy is always being transferred to the outside, or to our surroundings, or we're picking up energy from our surroundings. So chemical energy is going into us in the form of food. We are making ATP in metabolism. In the course of making ATP with regard to our metabolic behaviors, we are giving off chemical waste, carbon dioxide and water, heat, with regard to even heat when we make ATP, and then heat in the whole process of breaking down molecules and building up molecules. Your muscles also give off a tremendous amount of heat when they contract. We'll pick this up on the next one.